Should we talk about some foreign affairs?
Definitely.
Okay. So let's switch gears to some foreign policy. Okay, so in a turn of events that should surprise no one, the United States government once again showed that it is actively and proudly engaging in regime change in Venezuela. Here is the United States Special Representative to Venezuela, Elliot Abrams, otherwise known as the Butcher of Central America, for his role in the hundreds of thousands of deaths there during Reagan's dirty wars, speaking openly about how the U.S. is trying to bribe generals so that they turn on Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Take a look.
We do try to get messages through to the people in the high command, sometimes publicly saying, look, Venezuela needs a modernized, paid military, and you're not going to get it from Maduro. We need to reestablish the kind of mill-mill relationship we once had.
I mean, that guy just looks like a cartoon villain in a Pixar movie. But, this was at a Senate hearing on Venezuelan policy, and he was being questioned by senators. And here's what Texas's proud Latinx Senator Ted Cruz responded by asking, what more can we be doing to coup Maduro? Take a look.
So what more, in terms of carrot and stick, can Congress do and can the administration do to change the calculus for the generals and admirals so that they come to the unequivocal conclusion it is much, much worse for me if Maduro stays in power than if this illegitimate regime is toppled and if instead you have a democratically legitimate government in Venezuela?
So yeah, the American right is just lusting for some good old-fashioned regime change in Latin America. What could go wrong? Probably just a civil war there with a potential for hundreds of thousands of deaths. So what, may you ask, are our good liberals in the opposition doing to stop these warmongers? Basically, they're doing that thing that liberals always do, which is not to question the premise of the insane thing, just merely criticize it on narrow tactical grounds. Case in point, Connecticut's Democratic Senator Chris Murphy.
When you say to Senator Cruz, you hope he's not there at the end of the year, how much of that is predicated on a continued belief that you can split the military leadership away from Maduro? And second, what did we learn from 2019 about the ways in which Maduro has successfully and perhaps surprisingly to American diplomats been able to hold together his leadership?
Then it got really embarrassing. Chris Murphy later tweeted, quote, "Then it got real embarrassing. In April 2019, we tried to organize a kind of coup, but it became a debacle. Everyone who told us they'd rally to Guaido got cold feet, and the plan failed publicly and spectacularly, making America look foolish and weak." He then continued, quote, "It's a total disaster. After a year and a half, Maduro is stronger, American influence is weaker, and there is no viable path to restore democracy in Venezuela. A case study in international relations malpractice." But that is our brave opposition, ladies and gentlemen. They believe, of course, we have the inalienable right to decide who runs any country in the world. The problem is that you Republicans are just going about it in the wrong way. But this wasn't always the case. Back in the 1980s, when the Reagan administration was waging a vicious war on Central American peasants, the Democrats in the Senate actually voted to pass legislation barring the administration from sending funds to right-wing death squads. I mean, that's why the Reagan administration had to do the whole complicated Iran-Contra affair. Now, it's not to say that those Democrats in the 1980s were these kind of brave radicals or anything like that. They were just the bare minimum you could expect from any decent opposition party. But today's Democrats are a far cry from that very, very low standard. I mean, just look at the way they reacted to the coup last year in Bolivia. I mean, who could forget this Mother Jones editor Clara Jeffrey tweet? It's a first ballot Hall of Fame tweet. Quote, "Dicey times in Bolivia. Morales had taken several end runs around a democratic process, but let's hope it's a democratic process that succeeds him." Remember, Evo Morales, Bolivia's first ever indigenous president, was ousted in November of last year in a right-wing coup after the Organization of American States said that there were, quote, irregularities in that month's election results. I mean, the issue wasn't whether Morales won the election, it was whether he won by a large enough margin to avoid a runoff. But just a few months later, even the New York Times admitted that the OAS's claims were bullshit, with this totally epic headline, quote, "A bitter election, accusations of fraud, and now second thoughts." The subhead reads, "A close look at Bolivian election data suggests an initial analysis by the OAS that raised questions of vote rigging and helped force out a president was flawed." Whoopsie daisy. Looks like the coup that both conservatives and liberals here in the United States supported was based on false info. Ouch. Now, Janine Áñez, Bolivia's interim and insane right-wing president, has postponed the elections. She promised not once, but twice now. So I'm sure that has nothing to do with the fact that the guy running under Evo Morales' party is leading the polls by a wide margin. You know, maybe if he, I don't know, mysteriously caught COVID and died, then the election could go off without a hitch. But as long as he's leading the polls, I reckon that election will never actually happen. And the totally illegitimate Janine Áñez will remain interim president for a very, very long time. But of course, our liberals will never, ever reckon with this out of a combination of historical amnesia. I mean, they can't remember what happened 2 weeks ago, ideology, and just plain stupidity. But I guess what bothers me most about what Clara Jeffrey and the Chris Murphys of the world is that they have no ability to grapple with how bad their heroes are when they're in office. I mean, sure, the Trump administration is full of bumbling fools and psychopaths, and that is reflected in their policies towards Venezuela. But what about when their guy, Barack Obama, was in office? You know, the cool, collected, smart president that we all miss so dearly. Well, if you go back to 2009, you had a very similar situation play out in Honduras. Manuel Zelaya, the country's democratically elected president, was ousted in a military coup, which Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton fully supported, despite the fact that basically every other Latin American nation strongly condemned it. Well, what happened in Honduras since then? Well, an insane right-wing administration took over, and they immediately got in bed with drug cartels while cutting social services. The crisis got so bad that it fueled mass migration to the United States through Central America. I mean, remember those caravans that everyone was freaking out about? Those were mostly coming from Honduras. And let's not even talk about Libya, another bit of regime change under Barack Obama that had the whoopsie unintended consequence of revitalizing the slave trade there. I mean, we cannot just criticize the right on these narrow tactical grounds. We have to reject their premises outright. But sadly, it seems like even a lot of self-described leftists have absorbed the logic of empire. Last week, the historian and friend of the show, Daniel Bressner, tweeted out a poll asking, "Are there any conditions in which a U.S. social democrat should support the use of military force abroad?" 61% of the respondents said yes. Now, I know it's a Twitter poll. It's by no means scientific, but it's safe to assume that the vast majority of Bressner's followers are on the American left, and still a clear majority said yes. I said no. I cannot imagine a real-world scenario today which would justify sending in the current U.S. war machine because, unfortunately, you go to war with the war machine you got, not some imagined one. And the U.S. war machine today only leads to destabilization and mass death. So I refuse to weigh in on whether I think the Maduro regime is good or quote unquote bad, because as an American citizen kind of operating in America, the only real upshot that can come out of criticizing an official enemy of the United States is sending in the US war machine. And I know for a fact that that would be catastrophic.
I love that segment, mostly because there are too few people making the points that you're making right now. And for people on the left who think that there might be situations in which this current administration could or should use military force abroad, understand that we've been conditioned, for a lot of us since the moment we were born, to think that the United States is constantly under this extreme threat.
Yeah.
But in reality, we are the largest, we have the strongest military capability. We spend more on our military than any other country. China is expanding its militarism and, its military capability as well, but it's still no match for the United States. So, if you want to make an argument about national security, we have the means and the capability to protect our national security without invading countries abroad. And, Abby Martin will later talk to us about this in greater detail, but if you look at what motivated the United States to invade Afghanistan, it really wasn't 9/11. It really wasn't that terrorist attack on our own country. There were other material incentives involved. And whenever you hear about the United States toppling a regime, it's always presented to the American public under this guise of spreading democracy or protecting a democracy, protecting civil rights, civil liberties, I should say. But in reality, what's at play is a country that has its own issues with human rights, using this accusation against other countries to justify their invasion, right? So the United States has its own issues. We have a civil uprising right now in the country because of those issues. And so do we want some other country to invade us because of the way, policing happens in this country? Of course we don't. We believe that we can change it ourselves. We don't want to be invaded. So what makes the United States think that it's acceptable to invade a country, kill countless civilians, which we've done in the Middle East, which we're currently engaging in with the war in Yemen? Like, how is that going to help a country prosper or become more quote unquote democratic? Small d democratic. It's just that history has not really proven that. In fact, we've done the exact opposite. And, I think at some point you and I should engage in maybe a debate if we can find the right guest to do it. I have a hard time believing that there's really a fundamental difference between Democrats and Republicans in office right now. And so I see differences in rhetoric. There's no question about that. But fundamentally, across the board, when it comes to questions of the economy, foreign policy, domestic policy, they want the same things. And it's all motivated by capitalism. It's all motivated by material incentives.
Yeah, I mean, there was one of the best Onion pieces ever was a fake gala in Washington that gathered a bunch of Democrats and Republicans to celebrate the 25th anniversary of continuously bombing Iraq. The United States has basically been at war with Iraq this was at the time when this was published, for 25 years, starting from the early 90s, all the way through the 90s, through the 2010s. And it was all the old gang was there, Bush Padre, Clinton, Bush Jr., Cheney, Obama, we all kind of participated in the destruction of this country over the last decades, really just nonstop destruction. And you're right. I mean, on issues of war and peace, there is a slight difference in terms of rhetoric. I remember when we intervened in Libya, it was on liberal humanitarian grounds. I remember just breathless media coverage about the oncoming genocide in Benghazi. I don't know, you probably remember because you're probably covering it at the time. And it was I remember Bernard-Henri Levy going on TV yelling about how Gaddafi was about to commit a genocide in Benghazi. And it really drummed up support for military intervention. It seemed what do we got to do? We got to do something. We got to do something. We can't do nothing. And we did the thing. We did the something. And we got him out. He got a gun stuck up his butt and killed. And the country has fallen into a state of total just chaos, anarchy, slave trade, warring tribes. It just absolute disaster. And we never reckon with that. It's we can only think of the immediate kind of thing right there. And you're right. I don't even think that's the bug. I really think that's the feature. I mean, destabilizing regions of the world, again, goes back to a profit motive, really. I mean, we talk about the military-industrial complex. It sounds cliche, but it's true, right? I remember reading a piece by Glenn Greenwald years and years ago, and he was showing how there's just this intentional effort to destabilize entire regions of the world because that's the money pit that our resources will keep going to, right? These private contractors will keep making their money. So you got to ask yourselves, is it really about helping countries out, helping the civilians of those countries? It can't be, especially when you consider even under the Obama administration. What did he label civilians who would die as a result of
drone strikes that relied on faulty intel. He called them collateral damage.
Yeah.
That was a statement from the Obama administration, not from the Bush administration, from the Obama administration. So, this is the problem with American empire. It is not meant to create peace across the globe. Yeah. It's really meant to destabilize and to also, aside from these private contractors, to create situations in which the United States can take advantage of natural resources. That's also a huge part of it.
Yeah, like your bearded kind of Birkenstock wearing protester at an anti-war rally who's going like, Iraq, man, it's all about the oil, man, it's Cheney and Halliburton, man, and then like they're going into Venezuela because Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, man. Like that guy is more correct in his analysis, like very, very correct in his analysis, like more correct than like the head of the Brookings Institution or the Council of Foreign Relations, who's like, well, actually, it's a geopolitical game to stabilize a region about, and it's like, shut up, shut the hell up,
Yeah.
Like that bearded guy at the protest who like smells like ass is
patchouli or
100% correct. You know what I mean? And it's just, that's the reality of it. Like, the Bolivia, man, they're doing the coup because like the lithium trade and they have like 60% of the world's lithium reserves. And it's like, yeah, probably.
Yeah, definitely. Ben Burgess talked about that on the Michael Brooks show months ago. And it's just so on the money. Absolutely. By the way, Ben Burgess has a new show coming out, and you guys should check it out. It's actually going to premiere today. So check out his Twitter page for more details on that.